hip, tally-ho, Joolz Guides here, in which I wander around London and tell you fascinating facts. And we're just following on from the last video about King's Cross, actually. And today we're in Euston, and Euston is named after Euston Hall, which was the home of the Dukes of Grafton. The Duke of Grafton was Henry Fitzroy, the bastard son of King Charles II. Fitzroy, that means son of the king, as in French, like fils means son and roi means king, so Fitzroy, son of the king. He had many illegitimate sons, one of whom was Fitzroy. That's why that whole area over there is called Fitzrovia, because at the end of Tottenham Court Road there was a place called Totten Hall. If you look at the old maps, there was this sort of long lane leading down to this place called Tottenhall, which came into the possession of the Fitzroy family. Tottenham Court, which was part of Totten Hall. Who cares, I hear you cry. Anyway, look, this here, the 20th Middlesex Artists' Rifles. This was founded in the 19th century, and actually it was for the artistic fraternity, people who wanted to volunteer in the army, like actors, painters, jugglers, clowns. Even Noel Coward was a member. And they saw active service in the Boer War and the First World War. Quite a few of them received Victoria Crosses. Now it's the Place dance school, where I learnt a bit of lambada, the forbidden dance, and also a bit of Lindy Hop. Jazz hands. Yeah, that up there, that's Mars, the god of war, and Minerva, goddess of wisdom. I think they've moved now to the barracks in Regent's Park. But these days they're just called the Artist Rifles. And Bear Grylls, he did his training here as well. I think there's something to do with the Special Air Service, the SAS. But right opposite this place is the St Pancras New Church. Now we saw in the last video, we saw St Pancras Old Church, because that was on the other side of this road. Now when they built the new road, Euston Road, that was for people bringing their cattle down to Smithfield Market from out of town so that they wouldn't clog up the centre of London with all their cattle and stuff. But on the other side of it is the St Pancras Old Church, which we saw in my King's Cross video. But because all the posh people lived on this side, near these posh squares like Bloomsbury, the old church was getting too small. So in 1822, they built the new church here. At the time, it was the most expensive church ever built since St Paul's Cathedral. And the interesting thing about it is these caryatids. You see the ladies there. The caryatids are sculptures of ladies holding up buildings in place of columns. What are they called if they're male, Simon? Atlases. They're atlases or telemons. You know, an atlas, because an atlas holds up the world. So that's why they're called atlases. But the thing about this is Charles Rossi, right, when he was carving these, he made them too big. So if you look at them carefully, you can see that they look a bit odd. You can see that he had to cut the midriff in half, and sort of slice a section out of the middle of them. He did a fairly good job of trying to disguise it. They had to chop a little bit off. I mean, they would have faced out across open fields back in 1822, because that whole section there, where Somerstown is now, was just open fields. Just going to point out, by the way, Woburn Walk over there is a very beautiful little street, which is very old, but I've covered it in my other video about Bloomsbury, so we're going this way.
Well, there's just one old woman living in this town, keeps on telling those lies on me.
Now you see that pub over the road there, the O'Neill's, that's the one that used to be the Euston Tavern, I believe. I think so, anyway. In the song by the Pogues, The Sick Bed of Kilcallan. Out in the Euston Tavern, you screamed it was your shout, and they wouldn't give you service, so you kicked the windows out. They took you out into the street, kicked you in the brain, so you walked back in through the bolted door and did it all again. At the sick bed of Kilcallan, you kneel and say a prayer, and the ghosts are rattling at the door, and the devil's in the chair. And just opposite, this is the British Library. It used to be based in the British Museum. I remember they had that lovely round reading room. In terms of the amount of items catalogued, this is the biggest library in the world. And it's got things in there dating back like 2,000 years BC. But yeah, the British Library started with donations from people like King George II and King George III, who was very interested in science and discovery and all sorts. And there's a handful of libraries in England. I think one of them's the Bodleian Library in Oxford, and this one, and some others in Cambridge, where they're entitled to any book that's ever published, they're entitled to a copy of it. I might be wrong, but they've got most of them. And you see this sculpture up here. This was sculpted by yet another famous person who asked my mum out. It's by Edoardo Paolozzi. The list is getting longer and longer as I talk to my mum. It's John Hurt, Michael Howard, the MP, Peter Ustinov, and Sir Richard Rogers, the architect. I wonder who else is in her secret closet.
I wish to my God this old woman would die. Keeps on telling those lies.
Now, I wasn't coming down this way just to go to the strip club Sophisticats. Funny enough, my friend used to work in there. In fact, I know two people who used to work in there. Table dancers. They call them gentlemen's clubs. And we're not talking about talking about those posh places where Sherlock Holmes' brother reads the Daily Telegraph with a glass of sherry. But the real reason why we're coming down here is my favourite place for Malaysian food in London is here at the Roti King. I'm telling you, let's go and have a look. Can I have a Roti Cenai and nasi lemak ayam goreng berempah?
It's been here 6 years. I think the food here is really authentic and a lot of people like the taste. It reminds them of home. We have a lot of Malaysian customers.
That's always a good sign if you've got Malaysian people coming here.
Yeah, definitely, of course.
The only trouble is it's all arrived at the same time. Take a bit of this. Yeah, stick it in there. The thing is, when I was in Malaysia, I went to a place called Malacca and they had Roti Cenai, and I've been looking for it everywhere in London to try and find it done as well as that. And I have to say, I think I finally found the place which does it as well. It's absolutely excellent. I'm so pleased to have found it. And they're going to be on Uber Eats and Deliveroo soon. Always need more than one roti, though. That's the thing. Anyway, let's go this way. Look, it's called Doric Way after the Doric Arch, I assume, which used to be there in Euston, the famous Doric Arch, which was destroyed in one of the most criminal acts of vandalism by the council.
Was it because they couldn't fit the buses through it?
Oh, maybe that's true. Yeah, well,
Old Betjeman tried to save it, but he couldn't. So instead, he did go ahead and save St Pancras instead.
He was a legend. He saved so many parts of London, and he's done some brilliant videos, a little bit like Joolz guides as well. They're on YouTube. You should check them out. John Betjeman. He does them all to poetry. It's brilliant. I think that used to be called the Zombie Club downstairs. I spent my 21st birthday in there. Oh my God, I remember. How I ended up in there, I'll never know. When they first built the railway there in 1837, the trains didn't come all the way into Euston on their own. They stopped at Primrose Hill, and then they were pulled up. They were kind of tugged up here using a rope, towed in, using some sort of big pulley system thingy. So you'd go through here and there'd be a beautiful statue of Robert Stephenson, who was the son of, was it George Stephenson, the father of the railways? So he was the son of the father of the railways, so that makes him the railways, I suppose, or the railway's brother. I mean, look, the only part that survives now are these lodges here. Now, I think that the arch was a little bit further along, so you came through here. I just can't remember a time when there wasn't loads of work and construction going on here. There's always seemed to be building things, taking things down. Now they're doing this HS2, which is this massive train that's going to go really fast up to Birmingham. Loads of people over here, for example, are complaining about it. They're all protesting. Look, someone's even built a tree house. Look, check this out. Excellent. It must be really good fun for them, actually. But yeah, they've knocked down a whole load of the stuff. I mean, over there used to be a pub called the Brie Louise, which I used to drink in. But when you look at the brochure that the British Rail brought out in the 60s to advertise it, it all looks really cool. Kind of reminds me of that airport in North by Northwest where Cary Grant goes, you know, all state-of-the-art 60s. It's really, really nice. Not quite the same these days.
In a weird way, even now they've gained an age. It's got that 60s, 70s aesthetic, which is agreeable to many now.
Well, that's true. You like it. I mean, a lot of people...
Well, look, I don't prefer it to what was there before, but it's like it has turned.
Yeah, I've had architects write to me saying that, you know, sometimes they don't always agree with me when I grumble about these places. One guy was saying, look, I think I need to have a few words with you about some of your opinions on certain architecture. I was like, fair enough, come and have a word. Let's make a film about it. See all the places, I suppose, served by the railway. Manchester. Many a time I took the train from here to Manchester, where I went to university. And it always started raining when you hit Macclesfield. That's how and it's weird to look at me now. 3 years in Manchester, I never bought an umbrella. It's really weird. Now I'll carry one wherever I go. It actually used to look quite nice back in the 19th century. 1960s comes along. It's bizarre, isn't it, that they just thought that would be better, but...
The irony is they'll try to say that building where they want to, you know, the powers that be want to flatten it and put something new up.
Yeah, it's true actually. People will be up in arms. I'll be there saying flatten it, and everyone's saying, no, you can't do that. That's the classic 1960s.
And then they'll save it, they'll make a statue of it.
Just on the other side there, annoyingly, because I went in the other day to try and film on the inside, they were open, but they had closed the most interesting room. That is the Wellcome collection. Found something to do with Henry Solomon Wellcome. And he went around the world and collected lots of devices to do with medicine. I think he was like a medical historian or a doctor, a medical man anyway. They've got some very interesting stuff in there. My favourite room is the one which has got things like Victorian dildos and stuff like that in it. They're quite cool. It's a free museum, so it's a nice place to go there, but unfortunately, like everything else at the moment, it's closed. Actually, St Pancras was a pretty massive parish. It stretched all the way up from, I think, roughly Highgate, all the way down here and maybe as far as Oxford Street, certainly as far as here anyway. One of the biggest parishes in London. You're probably wondering why I'm taking you down here. I mean, sorry, this isn't one of my most picturesque walks, but that's what's here. What can I do?
Oh, baby, it ain't no lie. Oh, baby, it ain't no lie. Just that I'm living mine.
This is Drummond Street, which is named after Lady Drummond, who was the great-granddaughter of the Duke of Grafton. And the Duke of Grafton was Henry Fitzroy. You know, a lot of the stuff around here is connected with that family because they owned a lot of the stuff around here. But these days, there's lots of Indian restaurants here. I've had a pretty good curry down there before. And I do like this pub, the Crown and Anchor. I've drunk in there. It's quite nice, these details you kind of miss. If you look up at the top of this building here, you can see it says the Duke of Edinburgh. Can you see that on the camera? Some people think it used to be a pub. It wasn't a pub. This was like a beer shop. I suppose it was like kind of off the licence. I suppose it was a beer shop. But in Victorian times, a lot of places used to name their beer shops as if they were pubs. I don't know, to attract custom or something. So that was a beer shop called the Duke of Edinburgh. Don't stand so close to me. Do you remember Laurence Corner, Simon? There was proper army service to sell off all the stuff from the war. I think this little mannequin here is a reference to the days when it was Laurence Corner. But it was amazing in there, and they actually, I think they provided some of the costumes for Star Wars as well. And look, it says on here, on this site, inspired the Beatles for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, as well as being the haunt of the likes of Keith Moon, Boy George, Kate Moss, and clothes designers John Paul Gaultier and Vivienne Westwood. Look, some of the Star Wars accessories were even sourced from here. It was legendary, and I always used to come down here, and it had that smell, a bit like my house actually. That kind of second-hand smell. Look how wonderful pub there, look. I went to see my friend Vera in a play here once, Camden People's Theatre. Uncle Vanya, I don't know. Those Russian plays, people endlessly staring out of windows.
So I used to have meetings up there by a guy who ran a paranormal society.
Excellent.
And he'd invite guests, you know, ghost hunters and psychics and people that are into believing elves exist and all sorts. And they'd all have little discussions in there and stuff.
I've been traveling this whole wide world and I just got back today. Made all this money and I give it all to you, honey.
Look at the traffic along this. It was never like this. I mean, it could also be a lot of the lorries and stuff because of the HS2, but this is serious traffic jam, and it's just like this now. And look, and you'll be walking along here these days, and you don't realise that there's a cycle lane here. You forget. You might just sort of step out and splat into a cyclist. It'd be really wary, and now they put the bus stops sort of in the middle of the road. It's very confusing. Anyway, look, we've got an open space now to film this thing. This is the St Pancras Female Orphanage here. I mean, after that, it got used for people who were suffering with alcoholism, I think. I mean, this is the newer building. Originally, it was built in 1776. This is a much later reincarnation. There we go, rebuilt 1904. I quite like when you walk along these incredibly busy modern roads, and then you see something like that. Cheers me up. brightens my heart. And also this, look, the Prince of Wales, which looks like it's almost falling down. We'll have to get on the other side of the road to get a shot of it. Look at all that. I know it's not very nice to look at, but in a few years' time, this will all be done, and this will be HS2, and it's gonna, you know, it's gonna look completely different.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice to catalogue it in a way.
They all look like little mini coronavirus.
I think this one, or maybe it was the one that was next door that's now been knocked down, but this is where Charles Dickens went to school. It was the Wellington House Academy. You know, poor old Charles Dickens, he was working in a shoe blacking factory underneath where Charing Cross Station is now, Hungerford Stairs it was called, and then he managed to get out of that, aged about 12 or something, and he went to school here, where he encountered William Jones, the headmaster, who was very sadistic. We saw his grave over there in St Pancras Cemetery. It was William Jones, this sadistic headmaster. He really found the place quite seedy and unpleasant. And he based his character, Mr. Creakle, in David Copperfield on this headmaster here. And because David Copperfield is sort of a semi-autobiographical work. Anyway, he says of him, "I don't like the sort of school to which I once went myself, the respected proprietor of which was by far the most ignorant man I have ever had the pleasure to know. One of the worst-tempered men, perhaps, that ever lived." The fella up there, George Crookshank, apparently he lived in this building, so maybe the school was next door. But anyway, he was a friend of Charles Dickens. I think he illustrated some of his books. But just over here is Mornington Crescent.
So his friend, the painter, just happened to live next door to the
school
academy in which he used to go to.
Yeah, I think that must have been a bit later on that he was living there. I mean, unless there was a bit of weirdness going on. But a lot of this is famous for artists around here. Walter Sickert, who some people claim was Jack the Ripper, he lived in that house over there. Look, this is Mornington Crescent. Let's walk up it. And yes, so Walter Sickert lived in there, and he was a part of this Camden group of painters, Walter Bayes, Wyndham Lewis, Spencer Gore. They all used to meet here at Walter Sickert's home. One of the reasons why people thought that Walter Sickert was Jack the Ripper was because he painted famously a picture of Jack the Ripper's bedroom. Apparently his landlady or something claimed that the previous occupant of his room was Jack the Ripper. Later, in 1907, when there was another prostitute got murdered in Camden, he painted that. It was called the Camden Town Murders, but I think it's pretty much been refuted that he was Jack the Ripper. He isn't. My dad used to work in this building here. This was opened in the 1920s when I think it was just after Tutankhamun had been discovered or dug up, and so Egyptian themes were very fashionable at the time. They had a big chariot race along here for the opening ceremony, and you can see these kind of, look on the outside, it's all decorated with I don't know, Egyptian looking cats and whatever. Now it's called Greater London House, but this used to be the Carreras Black Cat cigarette factory, and smoking their cigarettes was supposed to be equivalent to the luxuries of ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt was supposed to be all sort of luxuriant, like their cigarettes. But I do know that when my dad worked in here, apparently he wasn't very happy. I don't know what they did to upset him. It's just an office block now, I think. Well, this whole building was built on what was the nice communal garden of Mornington Crescent. These houses in Mornington Crescent, which are all rather beautiful, they had a nice communal garden here, and then they built that on it. Poor chaps. Never mind. I see another beautiful Mornington Crescent sign, the Borough of St Pancras. You see, of course, the Borough of St Pancras doesn't really exist anymore. We're now in the Borough of Camden, so you know that that's an old street sign. Points for spotting the old street sign from before 1965. Because look, over here, Arlington Road, by contrast, is Camden. All got merged into one.
Somerstown, 1923.
Is this the way to Harvard Square?
You are a red fox.
This is where the KGB used to secretly meet double agents and stuff. Guy Burgess, for example, and they would come out of this station. The code word would be to ask the way to the fictional station Harvard Square. One of the most English examples of broadcasting, apart from Test Match Special, which is excellent by the way, is a programme on Radio 4 called I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue, in which they play this game, which is completely inexplicable. No one actually knows the rules. They seem to name, I think they just name tube stations or something, and they take it in turns, and it goes on for ages and ages, and they're just saying Piccadilly Circus, Euston, and then after a while, somebody finally says Mornington Crescent, and everyone bursts out laughing, and apparently that person wins the game. Like, it's completely alien to me how they actually worked. Anyway, that's the reason for the Willie Rushton plaque on the inside, is because he was quite often on this show, I think. Was he Just a Minute, or I'm Sorry I Haven't a Clue? Anyway, he was one of the famous people in it. I seem to remember Willie Rushton as just doing the voice of Winnie the Pooh. Is that right? Is that right? Just coming up to Delancey Street now, and this is where Robert Elms lives, somewhere around here, I think. I think that Robert Elms off the radio. He does a lot of London shows, and I dare say he's probably been to this excellent coffee place here. Like, you can smell, it smells amazing. It's so nice, and look at the queue he's got today. You can see all about this coffee place in a part of the show that I like to call Vintage Joolz Guides.
It's the oldest coffee shop in London. There are still rows in the shop.
How long has this place been here?
Since 1947, basically. We got the shop from a distant relative in 4th of May 1978. That's what they look like. Yeah, it doesn't smell, it doesn't taste of anything. It has to be roasted first.
Can I have 250 grams of
Costa Rica?
medium strong? Good, yeah. Great, it's so old school in here. I love it. Even the old weighing scales as well. It's fantastic.
Shall I grind it for you? You can smell it now.
It really does. When I took it home the other day, everyone on the train starts looking at you.
Yeah.
What's that smell? Who's that? It smells of coffee.
Everybody smells coffee. Some people they think I smell like a toast.
If you're hungry, it makes me want to have breakfast. So how do you know when they're done?
Oh, it's experience. It's experience.
I'm melting up in here. I don't know how he close to it.
Same thing all day.
Yeah.
From the time I come to the time I leave.
Lovely.
Okay?
Lovely.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've lost the end of my microphone. Yeah. Oh, I hope it hasn't been roasted inside the coffee machine. So look at that, how it used to say there. Look, it used to say 38, is it? 38 Delancey Street, Gloucester Gate.
Oh yes, that's right.
Why those old signs? Nice.
Oh, baby, it ain't no lie. Oh, baby, it ain't no lie.
Come along, Simon. Sky's beginning to bruise. Night must fall, and we shall be forced to camp. Down here somewhere, Albert Street, I'm on a pilgrimage. Number 127 Albert Street. That is the one, right, where an actor called Vivian McKerrell lived with Bruce Robinson back in the 1960s. And there was always lots of actors coming and going. They were all studying up at the Central School of Speech and Drama. But anyway, Bruce Robinson based Withnail, in the film Withnail and I, on the times that he had in this very house here. It's amazing to think that quite a lot of it really happened, all this crazy guy that he lived with. And in fact, it was in this very house that McKerrell drank lighter fluid. He drinks the lighter fluid, doesn't he? He goes, "What's in your toolbox? You've got antifreeze. Don't be an idiot, Withnail. You should never mix your drinks." I suppose it makes sense in the last scene in the film where Withnail walks through the park back home in this direction. Never thought of it before, actually. See my Regent's Park video. A night at the Sheephaven Bay, I think.
Just that I'm living mighty. Oh, baby, it ain't no lie.
Now, this pub has a quiz on Monday nights at about 7 o'clock, and Pat is my favourite quiz master in the pub quiz, so I highly recommend it, and you get free sausage and chips and beans afterwards. It's really cool.
Cheers.
Cheers, Simon.
Cheers.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. It really helps, makes a massive difference, and follow me on Instagram, which is @Joolz Guides Official. See you next time, folks. Cheers.
Oh, baby, it ain't no lie. Good Lord, just that I'm living mighty.